Hello everybody, my name is Freaksy, and I think Pokemon might finally be at a turning point. Not because of a new mainline game, not because of a new generation, but because of a spin-off game that did something Pokemon hasn't done in a long time. It tried something different, and it worked. So, we need to ask a serious question. Is Pokemon actually falling behind, or is it just being held back? So, before we discuss Game Freak, we need to actually understand how the Pokemon game structure works for development, because it's not just one studio. You've got Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures Inc., all working together under the Pokemon Company, and the franchise is massive. We are talking 489 million games sold. So if Pokemon ever feels small, it's not because it is, it's just because the games haven't scaled with how big the franchise has become. For years, Pokemon had a clear identity, 2D games, tight design, and consistent improvements. Then everything changed with Pokemon X and Y. The jump to 3D was huge, but also raised expectations, and since then, things have been mixed. Games like Pokemon Sword and Shield and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold incredibly well, but also brought performance issues, visual criticisms, and feeling a Pokemon just wasn't evolving fast enough. Not because the ideas weren't there, but because the expectations couldn't be kept up. And now, something different has shown up. Pokopia. A slow life Pokemon game. No gyms, no Elite Four, no traditional structure. Just living in the world. And it sells over 2.2 million copies in just 4 days. That's not normal for a spin off. That tells us something important. People don't just love Pokemon battles, they love the Pokemon world. And the world can clearly support way more than just one type of game format. So, it's easy to point the finger at Game Freak and say they're the problem, but that's too simple. They're handling new generations, new regions, new mechanics, new Pokemon, having to make a brand new engine for Generation 10, as well as thinking about remakes for older games. All of this on a really tight release schedule, as well I know as Pokemon for the franchise the size it is, they really have a very small budget compared to studios who make games of this size normally. For a franchise this big, that's a lot. So maybe the issue isn't that Game Freak is failing, maybe it's asked their carry to too much for a franchise of Pokemon size on their own. So I think this shows up significantly in the remakes that Game Freak have really stretched. Take Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. They felt safe. And that's the problem. Because other games have really already showed what remakes can be. Look at Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake. Or games like Octopath Traveler. Not necessarily a remake, but both games that show you don't need full 3D. You just need direction. So why not let a different studio handle remakes and let Game Freak focus on the future, while letting other teams reimagine the past properly? I appreciate that, Game Freak have already had people like Creatures Inc. help with games in the past, especially the Let's Go games, but I think we need people just to fully take over, and maybe Game Freak can help consult a bit on the games, but they really need to step away from making remakes, as they need to concentrate fully on how big of a scope the Pokemon games are. It's an incredibly huge franchise. They're split too thinly, so have to worry about making old games again when they should be pushing the franchise further, as the rest of the franchise is growing significantly, and it feels like the games are being left behind due to lack of budget and staff and things like this. When you look at how much they're putting into other parts of the franchise, when the games are a real significant part of what has made the franchise as big as it is. Now, here's where things really open up. For nearly 30 years, Pokemon has done one thing: you play as a trainer. But some of the best Pokemon games didn't follow that at all, like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where you are the Pokemon. And those games prove something important: that Pokemon works just as well, if not better, for a completely different perspective. So, instead of just repeating that idea, let's push it further. Imagine a Pokemon game where you don't just play as a Pokemon. You build a legacy. You start small, weak, learning to survive. You explore a real ecosystem. You hunt, you hide, you evolve. You grow stronger,
Maybe you become an alpha, maybe become a leader of a group, maybe you shape the entire area around you, and then your journey ends. But the game doesn't. You continue as your offspring, or another Pokemon influenced by everything you did, and the world changes because of you. Territories shift, rivalries grow, ecosystems evolve, and you're not just playing through a story, you're creating one. Maybe similar to how Sims have, where you can take over and play as a new character when obviously the main one you're playing as dies. Something similar to that system within a Pokemon game, and just think of all of the different other options. And this is just one example game I could think of that could be really cool, just playing as the Pokemon's perspective. This is why Pokopia matters, not because it replaces the main series, but because it proves Pokemon has way more potential than it's using. The problem isn't creativity, the problem isn't structure. Pokemon doesn't need to slow down, it just needs to spread out. More developers, more ideas, more time. Because right now, it feels like one of the biggest franchises in the world is still being made like a smaller one. And so, that's the part that makes Generation 10 so important. Because this isn't just another release, it's a massive test. A test of whether Pokemon is finally ready to evolve, or whether they're going to play it safe. Because the Pokemon world is already big enough. The question is, when are the games going to catch up? As we know, there is a brand new engine being released for Generation 10, which hopefully is going to make significant increases to Game Freak's ability to make these games look even more incredible. And hopefully, with the amount of money the Pokemon Company are making, they can pump a lot more money into this franchise and the main generation games, as well as allowing Game Freak just to concentrate on making the main series games and making them as good as possible, whilst allowing other game companies as like alongside them, like Creatures Inc., to make remakes and hopefully make other great spin-off games that can hopefully enhance the franchise, like I mentioned previously in the video as well. I definitely think there's a huge amount of potential, but the Pokemon Company really can't rely just on Game Freak. They need to give them bigger budgets and more developers helping them to make smaller games in the series so they can concentrate on the bigger picture itself. So, I really hope you've enjoyed my video and really can see the points that I'm putting on display. I really think it's important that Pokemon invest more into their game series, as well as bringing in new studios, as things like Pokemon Pokopia prove that these new franchises can give a fresh perspective, especially on the main series games, and give a different sort of formula. And I really think this could also allow Game Freak to push forward with the main series if they're giving enough backing again by the Pokemon Company themselves. I really hope you've enjoyed my opinions, and I really would like to hear your opinions on who you think should be making the next generation of Pokemon games. If you really have enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe, and maybe check out some of the other videos that I'll put on the screen in a moment. Thank you very much again for watching. It has been Freaksy. Goodbye.